Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast. You know the drill. You give us the reading material and we kind of jump in and explore it together and try to pull out the golden nuggets, right?
Absolutely.
The wisdom.
Yeah.
Today we are diving deep into a selection of hadiths from Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 6, which focuses on divorce.
Oh, interesting.
Now, this is a topic that
Yeah.
can spark a lot of, debate
Absolutely.
and misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to kind of unpack these hadiths with you
Yeah.
and see what we can get out of it.
See what kind of wisdom we can glean, right? I think that's going to be a fascinating look.
Yeah.
Because these hadiths give us such a unique window
Yeah.
into how early Islamic society grappled with, marriage and separation. And,
Yeah.
and some of the scenarios are,
Yeah.
I mean, even reading them now,
Yeah.
centuries later,
Yeah.
some of them are surprisingly relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
let's just get right into it. The first thing that jumps out at me is how strongly divorce is discouraged in these hadiths.
Yes.
There are some pretty powerful statements here.
Yes.
Like, Allah did not make anything lawful more abominable to him than divorce.
Yeah.
That's from Hadith 2172.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 2173, which says that of all the lawful acts, the most detestable to Allah is divorce.
Wow.
Those are some serious words.
They really are. I mean, when you read those, you
Yeah.
really get the sense that, in Islam, divorce is viewed as a last resort.
Right.
It's something that is permissible, but certainly not encouraged at all.
Right.
And it's important to remember the context here,
Yeah.
right? The historical context.
Yeah.
So, in those times,
Yeah.
a woman's social and economic security
Yeah.
was often tied to her marriage.
Right.
So divorce could leave her in an extremely vulnerable position,
Yeah.
facing, potential poverty and social stigma.
Yeah.
So by, really discouraging divorce, what Islam was, in a sense, doing
Yeah.
was trying to build a safety net. Yeah.
For women within,
Uh-huh.
the societal structure.
That makes a lot of sense. It wasn't just about, restricting people's freedom.
Right.
It's about protecting those who might be most adversely affected
Yeah,
by
okay.
separation. So it's about fostering family unity,
Yes.
but also about safeguarding the well-being of
Mhm.
all parties involved,
Mhm.
especially the more vulnerable ones.
Exactly. And this emphasis on
Yeah.
protecting the vulnerable
Yeah.
extends even to how the divorce process
Yeah.
itself is structured.
Okay.
So the hadiths outline
Yeah.
very specific procedures
Yeah.
that must be followed.
Yeah.
And these procedures are really designed to ensure fairness
Right.
and transparency.
Okay.
For instance,
Yeah.
Hadith 2181
Yeah.
emphasizes the importance of having witnesses
Oh.
present during the pronouncement of divorce.
Oh, okay.
And that's to help prevent any future disputes
Gotcha.
or claims of misunderstanding. Yeah, it's like having that legal framework
Exactly.
in place so
Yeah.
that things don't get messy or
Right.
unfair.
It's not just about the emotional aspect of divorce.
Yeah.
It's also about, establishing this legal and social framework
Mhm.
that minimizes harm and ensures justice.
Right.
And speaking of legal frameworks,
Yeah.
there are some really interesting rules about the timing of divorce.
Okay.
So Hadith 2180, for example,
Yeah.
states that a husband should not pronounce divorce while his wife is menstruating.
Okay.
He should wait until she's in a state of purity.
Okay, that one definitely raises an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason for that?
Well, there are a few interpretations.
Okay.
Some scholars, view this as a gesture of respect
Okay.
and consideration for
Yeah.
the woman's, physical and emotional state.
Right.
Divorce is already a
Yeah.
difficult experience.
Of course.
And adding the complexities of menstruation
Right.
to the mix could make it even more stressful.
Right. So it's about being sensitive
Exactly.
and choosing the right time
Yeah,
for such a weighty conversation.
precisely. Others see it as a more practical measure
Okay.
to avoid any confusion about the start of the waiting period.
Oh.
Or, as it's known in Islamic terminology, the iddah.
Oh, yeah. Ida. I've heard about that,
Yeah.
but never really understood it. Can you explain that in a way that,
Sure.
Makes sense to someone
Yeah.
living in the 21st century?
Absolutely. Imagine it as a grace period
Yeah,
after a
it's that.
divorce. It's a period of time during which a woman cannot remarry.
Okay.
And this waiting period, which is mentioned in hadiths like 2184,
Yeah.
2274,
Mhm.
and 2275,
Okay.
serves a few important purposes.
Okay.
So firstly, it ensures clarity about any potential pregnancy from the previous marriage.
Oh, that makes sense. Like a built-in paternity test.
Exactly. No DNA kits needed back then.
Right.
And secondly, it gives the woman time to process the emotional upheaval of divorce
Yeah.
and to kind of get back on her feet, both emotionally
Yeah.
and if necessary, financially.
Right.
And this was particularly crucial in a time when women might have been financially dependent on their husbands.
Yeah. Like a buffer zone.
Exactly.
Chance to regain equilibrium
Yeah.
before jumping into another marriage
Yeah.
or making major life decisions.
And it really highlights this emphasis on protecting women's rights and well-being,
Right.
even within the framework of divorce.
Right.
Now, speaking of protecting women,
Yeah.
this next hadith is
Yeah.
particularly interesting.
Okay.
It addresses a pre-Islamic practice called zihar,
Zihar. Okay.
where a husband would compare his wife to his mother,
Okay.
effectively dissolving the marriage.
Wait, comparing your wife to your mother ended the marriage.
That's right.
Sounds...
It seems strange to us now,
Yeah.
but in pre-Islamic Arabia, this utterance held a particular social weight. It was a way for a man to express his, anger or
Yeah.
frustration, but the consequences were often quite severe for the woman.
Right.
Islam, however, recognized the potential for misuse and the injustice that this practice could cause.
So what did Islam do about that?
So hadiths 2204,
Yeah.
2208,
Right.
and 2212
Yeah.
discuss how Islam reformed this practice.
Okay.
So instead of automatically ending the marriage,
Yeah.
it introduced the concept of expiation.
Expiation. Okay.
So if a husband uttered the words of zihar,
Yeah.
he had to perform certain acts of atonement to restore the marriage.
So it's like Islam took a custom that was potentially very harmful
Yes.
and turned it into an opportunity for reflection and reconciliation.
Exactly.
Wow. That's fascinating how they adapted existing practices to align with principles of justice and compassion.
And there's a great story about a woman named Khawla,
Khawla.
whose husband uttered the words of zihar during an intimate moment.
Oh, wow.
And this is mentioned in hadiths 2208 and 2212. And she felt deeply wronged. And, being a strong and determined woman, she took her case all the way to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And her persistence ultimately led to the revelation of verses in the Quran outlining the specific acts of expiation for zihar.
Wow. Khawla sounds amazing.
She does.
What an incredible story and just inspiring.
It is. It's a testament to, the importance of seeking justice and advocating for oneself.
Wow. So these acts of expiation, were they like a punishment?
Well, they were interesting because they offered options,
Right.
recognizing that people's circumstances varied.
Right.
So a husband could choose to free a slave, fast for 2 consecutive months, or feed 60 poor people.
Wow. So it wasn't like a one-size-fits-all punishment.
Exactly. And this idea of considering individual circumstances pops up in another fascinating story.
Okay.
The story of Salama,
Right.
who broke his Ramadan fast with his wife.
Ooh, breaking the fast during Ramadan?
Yeah.
That's serious business.
It is, and this is mentioned in Hadith 2207.
Okay.
And he was given the option of freeing a slave,
Okay.
fasting for 2 months consecutively,
Mm-hmm.
or feeding 60 poor people.
So even when dealing with transgressions, Islamic rulings consider human nature and individual situations.
Absolutely. The focus wasn't on, harsh punishment,
Yeah.
but on finding a suitable way for this person to make amends for his actions.
And this idea of thoughtful consideration comes up again when we look at the hadith that addresses a woman seeking a divorce without a strong reason.
Right. That's Hadith 2218.
2218.
And while Islam allows women to initiate divorce,
Yeah.
this hadith discourages frivolous separation, urging women to really carefully consider the implications before making such a decision.
Yeah.
Because divorce could have, significant social and economic consequences, especially for women in those times.
Right.
So it emphasizes that it's not a decision to be made lightly, but one that should be approached with seriousness and a clear understanding of its impact.
So let's say a couple does get divorced.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of reconciliation or remarriage?
Absolutely.
Right.
Islam doesn't shut the door on reconciliation. In fact, it encourages couples to explore that option whenever possible.
That makes sense. I mean, considering the emphasis on just family unity. So what do the hadiths say about this process?
So Hadiths 2189 and 2190 outline the conditions under which a husband can take back his wife after a divorce. There are specific procedures to follow. And it's important to note that there are limitations, especially when it comes to the number of times this can occur.
Yeah. I've heard about the 3 pronouncements of divorce.
Right. Exactly.
Things get a lot more complicated after the 3rd one.
That's when things get really interesting.
Okay.
So Hadith 2302 explains that after a 3rd divorce, a couple cannot simply remarry. The woman must marry another man, consummate the marriage, and then obtain a divorce from him before she can potentially reconcile with her first husband.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
It is. But there's a reason for this complexity. It's like a safeguard to ensure that the couple is truly serious about reconciliation. And not just, entering into remarriage on a whim.
Like a major commitment test.
Exactly. So it highlights the gravity of a 3rd divorce and emphasizes the need for genuine reflection and commitment for any future attempts at rebuilding the relationship.
So let's say reconciliation isn't possible and the divorce is finalized. What happens then?
That's a crucial question. And the hadiths offer some insight into that as well. For example, Hadith 2269 discusses the rights of a divorced mother to custody of her child, highlighting that she has a greater claim as long as she remains unmarried.
So it seems like Islamic law recognizes that special bond.
It does.
Between mother and child.
Absolutely.
Especially in those early years?
Yes, but it's not just about the mother's rights. The hadith also emphasizes the father's responsibility for financial support and guardianship. It's about finding that balance that protects the child's well-being while acknowledging the roles and responsibilities of both parents, even after the marriage has ended.
It's interesting how Islam tries to strike that balance.
It does.
And ensure that the child isn't caught in the middle.
Exactly. And speaking of children, these hadiths also delve into the complexities of disputed paternity.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine the challenges they faced back then without modern DNA testing.
You can say that again. But we have a whole cluster of hadiths that address this. 2247. 2247A, 2255, 2256. 2257, 2258, 2260, 2262, 2263, 2267, and 2268. All of these address various scenarios surrounding paternity disputes. And we see cases of accusations of adultery, children born with unexpected physical features, situations where multiple men could potentially be the father.
Talk about some real-life drama.
It is.
How do they even begin to sort out these situations?
Well, they used a variety of methods, some of which might seem a bit unusual to us today. They relied on oaths, the invoking of curses, and even, careful observation of a child's physical characteristics to try to determine lineage.
So they were trying their best with the tools available.
They were. And the emphasis was always on fairness, justice, and the well-being of the child. For example, Hadith 2256 states that Allah will not show mercy to a woman who knowingly brings a child into a family that doesn't belong there.
So it's about upholding truth and accountability.
And these hadiths also shed light on some of the societal factors that might have contributed to these disputes.
Like what?
Well, Hadith 2257 explicitly prohibits prostitution in Islam. And this marked a significant shift from pre-Islamic practices. And this prohibition aimed to establish clearer lines of lineage and reduce the potential for paternity uncertainties.
I see. So it's all about creating a more stable and just society where family structures are clearly defined and the rights of all members are protected.
The hadiths we've discussed so far demonstrate how Islam, through its rulings on divorce and related matters, really sought to regulate this complex and sensitive aspect of human relationships.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. It's fascinating to see how these centuries-old teachings still resonate today.
They do.
And there's more to unpack.
There is.
Next time, we'll delve into the mourning practices for widows.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast. Last time we really dove headfirst into this world of divorce, as laid out in Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 6. And
we did.
It was an eye-opener.
It was.
And it wasn't just about, the do's and don'ts, but about the why behind those rules.
The reasoning.
Protecting the vulnerable, promoting justice, all that good stuff.
Yeah. It's amazing how much depth and nuance is packed into these hadiths, right? They offer practical guidelines, of course, but they also provide this framework for ethical decision-making, even in situations as emotionally charged as divorce.
Absolutely. And we explored everything from the discouraged act of divorce itself to the procedures involved, and even dove into some specific scenarios that highlighted the flexibility and compassion within Islamic rulings.
That's a beautiful system, isn't it?
It is. So today we're going to be shifting our focus, though it's still connected to the theme of loss and transition.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring the mourning practices observed by widowed women.
Okay.
As described in this collection of hadiths.
Interesting.
Now, this is an area I haven't given a whole lot of thought to before, to be honest. I know there are certain customs and traditions, but I'm really curious to understand the deeper significance behind them. What's the reasoning? The purpose, the impact on the individual and the community.
It's a fascinating area to explore. These mourning practices, they're often misunderstood, but they offer us a glimpse into how Islamic society approached death, grief, and this delicate process of healing and moving forward.
So what are some of the key things mentioned in these hadiths regarding mourning practices for widows? What sets them apart from mourning practices for other deceased individuals?
Well, right off the bat, Hadith 2292, narrated by multiple people, actually lays down a very clear distinction. It states that for a believer, the general mourning period for any deceased person shouldn't exceed 3 nights. But for widows, it's much longer, 4 months and 10 days.
Wow, that's quite a difference.
It is.
I'm guessing this extended period reflects the unique bond between husband and wife.
It recognizes the depth of that relationship and the significant impact it has on a woman's life. This extended period allows for emotional processing, adjustment to a new reality, and a gradual transition to a new chapter in life.
It's also interesting how specific the time frame is.
Right.
It's not just, a while or as long as you need. There's a defined period, which kind of suggests a structured approach.
Exactly. It's about striking a balance between allowing ample time for grief, but preventing excessive or prolonged mourning. Which could be detrimental to the individual's well-being.
So it's like saying, we understand your loss is immense, and we want to give you the time and space you need to grieve, but we also want to guide you towards healing.
Exactly. And this structured approach also reflects, the broader Islamic emphasis on balance and moderation in all aspects of life. So even in grief, there's a sense of order and purpose.
Now, besides the duration, are there any specific actions or behaviors that are restricted during this mourning period?
There are several. And they're described in detail in these hadiths. For instance, Hadith 2297, narrated by Salma, the Prophet's wife, states that a widow should avoid wearing certain colors of clothing, particularly those dyed with safflower or red ochre, and ornaments and adornments are also discouraged.
So it's like minimizing outward expressions of beauty during this period of grief.
Shifting the focus inward towards reflection and remembrance.
And the restrictions extend beyond clothing as well.
They do.
That same hadith mentions avoiding henna and kohl, which were typically used for beautification.
It's about embracing a simpler, more subdued appearance during this transitional period.
It's fascinating how these outward expressions reflect the inner state of being.
It is.
Is there a specific reasoning behind these restrictions?
The hadiths don't explicitly delve into the reasoning, but scholars have interpreted these practices in various ways. Some see them as a form of respect for the deceased, a way of outwardly expressing sorrow.
It's like saying, my focus right now is on honoring my late husband and processing my grief, not on, beautifying myself.
Precisely. Others interpret these restrictions as a means of protecting the widow during a particularly vulnerable time.
Okay.
So by minimizing her outward attractiveness, she's less likely to attract, unwanted attention or proposals of marriage.
Right. It's like society collectively saying,
exactly.
we understand you're going through a difficult time.
Yeah.
And we want to create this space for you to heal without feeling pressured to move on.
Exactly.
So these practices, viewed through this lens, highlight the community's role in supporting and protecting widows.
Absolutely.
Now, these restrictions sound pretty comprehensive. Are there any exceptions?
That's a great question. And the hadiths do address that.
Okay.
So Hadith 2298 sheds some light on this issue.
Okay.
It recounts the story of Hakim, whose husband had passed away.
Okay.
And she was suffering from sore eyes.
Okay.
And sent her slave girl to Salama, the prophet's wife, to inquire about using coal for treatment.
So it's a genuine medical need.
Exactly.
Not just,
not for beautiful
wanting to enhance her appearance.
So what did Salama advise?
Yeah. What did she say?
Drawing from the prophet's teachings, she said that coal could be used in cases of genuine need, but only at night.
Oh, okay.
And she emphasized that it should be removed during the daytime.
So there's a compromise there.
Right.
It acknowledges the need for medical care, but still maintains the spirit of the morning restrictions.
This exception highlights the principle of compassion and practicality.
It's not about blind adherence. It's about understanding the context.
While morning practices are important, they're not meant to cause unnecessary hardship.
Right.
There's a balance to strike.
Are there any other?
Yes, within that same hadith.
Okay.
Salama shares another instance where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, visited her after the death of her husband, Abu Salama. And she had applied aloe vera to her eyes, which were probably sore from crying and grief. And he gently pointed out that while aloe vera is not a perfume, it does enhance the face's glow. So he advised her to apply it only at night and remove it during the day.
So it's not just about the specific ingredient.
Exactly.
It's about the intention.
The intention behind it.
If it's for beautification.
Yes.
Even if it's a natural substance, it's best to avoid it.
That's right. And this hadith also offers alternative suggestions for hair care during mourning.
Okay.
So instead of using, scented oils or henna, the Prophet recommended using lote tree leaves.
Lote tree leaves.
Yes.
Okay.
And these leaves are known for their astringent and cleansing qualities, making them suitable for hair care without adding any fragrance or color enhancement.
So it's all starting to come together now.
Yeah.
The mourning period with its duration and restrictions is really about creating this space for widows to process their grief, honor their late husbands, and gradually transition back into life.
It's a time for introspection, healing, and spiritual growth.
Okay, before we move on from this discussion on mourning practices, is there anything else?
Yes, I think it's crucial to remember that these mourning practices, while rooted in tradition and religious guidance, are ultimately about providing support and space for healing. Not meant to be burdensome, restrictive, or inflexible.
It's such an important reminder that compassion and understanding should always be at the forefront.
Absolutely. And remember, Hadith 2293 recounts this poignant story that illustrates this very point. It tells of Furai, whose husband was tragically murdered while she was away.
Oh, my goodness.
And she was heartbroken, of course, and found herself in a very difficult situation.
Of course.
She had no home to return to and no means of financial support.
Wow. Being widowed is devastating enough.
Yeah.
But to be left without a home or financial support.
It's unimaginable.
On top of that.
So she sought guidance from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, asking, if she should return to her own people.
And what did he say?
He wisely instructed her to stay in her current home until her waiting period was over.
So this guidance, though seemingly simple, speaks volumes about the emphasis on providing widows with stability and security during their mourning period.
It's not just about the emotional aspect of grief.
Right.
It's also about those practical necessities of life.
It speaks to the community's responsibility.
It does.
To care for its most vulnerable members.
These hadiths, taken together, offer us a window into a system designed to guide individuals and communities through the difficult experience of death and loss.
Wow, we've covered so much today.
We have.
From the discouraged yet permissible act of divorce to the intricate procedures and scenarios, and now these fascinating mourning practices.
It's incredible how much wisdom and guidance is contained within these seemingly simple sayings.
But I think we need to pause here for now.
I agree. I think we've unpacked a lot.
Yeah, we have.
And it's important for our listener to have time to absorb all this. Right. We'll be back soon for the final part of this deep dive to recap our key takeaways.
Sounds good.
And leave our listener with some thought-provoking questions.
Welcome back to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast. This deep dive into the hadiths on divorce from Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 6, has been really incredible.
It has.
We've covered so much, from the discouragement of divorce to the procedures involved to the scenarios highlighting, compassion and flexibility to the mourning practices.
Yeah, it's been a rich exploration. It's remarkable how much wisdom is packed into these seemingly simple sayings.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment to recap for our listeners some of the key takeaways.
Sure.
First and foremost, it's clear that while divorce is permitted in Islam, it's definitely not encouraged.
Just viewed as a last resort, a weighty decision that shouldn't be taken lightly.
The hadiths emphasize the importance of preserving the family unit.
Yes.
And exhausting all other avenues before resorting to separation.
Exactly. The emphasis is on reconciliation, forgiveness.
Right.
And upholding the sanctity of the marriage bond.
And the hadiths acknowledge that sometimes divorce becomes unavoidable.
It does happen.
And in those situations, there are very specific procedures and regulations in place.
To ensure fairness and transparency.
And the protection of everyone involved, especially women and children.
Especially.
Who might be more vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely. We saw how, those procedures, from the timing of the pronouncement to the waiting period, are designed to minimize harm, prevent future disputes, and allow for reflection and emotional healing. It's about approaching even a difficult situation like divorce with a sense of order, justice, and compassion.
And what I found really fascinating was how Islam addressed some of these pre-Islamic practices that were potentially harmful.
Right. Yeah.
Like zihar, where a husband would compare his wife to his mother. It's amazing how those Quranic revelations responded to those issues.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the story of Kala, who challenged that injustice and contributed to a change in Islamic law, is so inspiring.
And those specific scenarios that we talked about.
Right.
Like the story of Salama, who broke his Ramadan fast.
Right.
I mean, that really highlighted how Islamic rulings aren't about rigid punishment.
No, they're not.
They take into account human nature.
Yes.
Individual circumstances.
And strive to find a path toward making amends.
And then we moved into exploring the mourning practices for widows.
Yes.
Which were so insightful.
Yeah.
It's not just about, outward expressions of grief, like wearing certain clothes or avoiding adornment. It's really about creating a space for deep emotional processing, honoring the deceased, and gradually transitioning back into life.
Those practices with their, specific duration and restrictions beautifully reflect the balance that Islam seeks to achieve.
And what's really striking to me is how those practices also emphasize the community's role in supporting widows.
Absolutely. It's about offering practical help, emotional support, and making sure that they're not left to face their grief alone.
These centuries-old teachings offer this timeless wisdom that's still relevant today.
They do.
They remind us that even in moments of, separation loss or hardship, there's a framework.
There is.
For healing, growth, and moving forward. Yeah. So as we conclude this deep dive, what stands out to you?
For me, it's the emphasis on balance and compassion. It's about approaching even difficult situations with a sense of understanding, seeking fairness, and prioritizing the well-being of all involved.
Absolutely. So for our listener, we leave you with a final thought-provoking question.
Yes.
How can we translate these ancient principles of fairness and compassion and community support into our modern world, where relationships and family structures
they're constantly evolving.
are constantly evolving?
Yeah.
How can we draw inspiration from these teachings to create a more just and compassionate society?
That's a powerful question.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Islamic teachings on divorce. Until next time, may your journey be filled with echoes of Ihsan.